Hello, I hope all is progressing well. Welcome to I Don't Know, We Can Talk About It, where we discuss myriads of topics civilly, reasonably, and responsibly. My name is Kevin Different. Our first topic regards principal training. The article engages dynamics which one may find somewhat on the side of the principle, though the present situations in the article that address adults generally are applicable to the principle. So when one is considering what might be necessary to be aware of entering a role, one may recognize that what the article mentions as somewhat idealistic is actually what might be happening in a different educational environment than from which one is in. One may find educational environments vary a lot, and that different parts affect an educational environment in different ways, in ways that a principal may have no control over, in ways that really falls outside the jurisdiction of an educational environment. When considering what is relevant to an educational environment, one may recognize that an educational environment may do well to satisfy what an educational environment offers. Though, when an educational environment attempts to address what may be external to an educational environment as a matter of which is an attachment to an educational environment, the extension may not fulfill the requirements of attention to properly assess what that extension involves. So when one is considering how a policy may be affecting an educational environment, one may address whether the policy is in direct effect with an educational environment particularly, or of what may be in the world external and educational environment. So, as are many things that are of the peripheral dimensions that may contribute to an environment. Now, an educational environment is an environment of itself. So when one is considering what might be affecting administration, staff, one may consider broadly and intricately what consists of the environment of education. So I think the areas of personality, of character, are extremely important to address. So one may recognize when human dynamics are at play, regardless of position. A principal may be doing a phenomenal job, may be an objectively good person, though may not be in an environment suitable for the individual. Whereas that is a grand dichotomy that might really bring into play that the principal's environment may be different than the environment everyone else experiences. Even though everyone is in the same physical space, a principal may be having to connect with a board members, superintendent, other dynamics that bring into question what is really beneficial. Then one might wonder, If a principal is in a position, what is the relevance of the board or superintendent? What is the relevance is a question that may come about when addressing what is the situation at hand that needs addressing that may be affecting an educational environment. Again, there are many different educational environments. There are many ways to succeed in the world at large. In education, beyond education, what education is to do is to ensure individuals may be efficient, functional in the world external, extant education. So when observing dynamics of leadership, one may wonder, well, what is anyone supporting? What is anyone not supporting? What is anyone fighting for? What is anyone creating? What is anyone contributing that does not only fall into line with a model that may not be beneficial to the clients, the individuals that are going to grow through these educational environments. Now, when regarding a principal, one may think elementary, middle school, high school, primary school, secondary school. The disconnects may become apparent when individuals are to matriculate into college. Higher education is vastly different. So different that when observing higher education, then observing what may be happening through K through 12, one may find that educational environments may cater way differently, in way broader, accurate, creative capacities than might already be happening. Yet, one may recognize that much of these years prior to higher education, if one is understanding these details, thinking one may be entering higher education as an adult, many of the adolescent years are developmental, even in consideration of being in higher education into one's 20s, one is still going through developmental stages. When one considers life long term, learning for life is extremely beneficial. One is actually through developmental stages all through one's life, with evidence to show that growth is a proactive, continuous process that individuals need to healthfully attend to if seeking to healthfully progress through life, enjoying life for as long as one lives. So I think when considering what dynamics might be at play when considering an educational environment, one must address the factors, the circumstances that need attention, that really rely on a network of individuals, a network of processes, so the clients succeed. Because the individuals that are going to work, finding satisfaction with the income, appreciating the job, may find that there are situations that need addressing in an educational environment that need champions to fight for what may be beneficial for educational environments, which may transcend beyond an educational environment. So there are many dynamics that one may consider with regard to what any in an educational environment may need to be aware of. It's very important to note that anyone may prove to be extremely valuable and relevant to beneficial causes, not just for the clients, though for education at large. So to put onus on any position, on any individual, without recognizing the balancing of an educational community is not setting the focal point on what education may be beyond a silo. The silo is of individuals that are of a realm of employment that is on shaky ground, though that individuals perceive in a way that may seem like it is an untouchable ground for the unaware. So, with individuals recognizing the communal dimensions of an educational environment, the organizational dimensions that are relevant, especially when one may be in it, though are finite to a great extent, though valuable, when individuals recognize the ligations of contributing members benefiting the community of the education environment, especially considering the growth, the objectively good dimensions, then individuals are really engaging with how an educational environment may prove to be more valuable and how to better address an educational environment with good growth. The other dimension that the article mentions regards hiring. What hiring criteria may prove sets many dimensions to the conversation. Not only hiring of the individuals in a particular area through the entire educational range. What might be effective in one educational environment may differ in another educational environment. Education is at a forefront of hiring, engaging with the reality of whether an individual with credentials is the best hire. Though qualifying. So the range of that conversation comes to a different factoring of conversation of employment, where individuals assess experience over accreditations, or vice versa. Our next topic. Born here to remain here. Born here to disappear. What is going to be when the factors of pregnancy do not find balance with regard to what may be of paternal realms in connection with maternal realms, when observing how the communing efforts may result differently depending on citizenship, depending on how one is set in the country of America, more so with the reliance of an economic boundary that ties into a familial boundary, tying into a social boundary, tying into a political boundary, that brings about not only regurgitation of what seems to be unnecessary, though does not address what presently needs attention in America, that involves the very same realms which are in connection with the regurgitation. So, birthright citizenship is valuable. One may consider the reality that if any other country shifts to a stance that may prove so accepting, and the country doing so's economy is booming and may benefit from such a shift, the economy may benefit from securing routes to ensure the return on investment, if one will prove satisfactory for the country's growth. Thinking of the country long term. Especially considering if the country is making the contributions that are not only securing jobs, creating routes of employment, though actually securing the routes of employment with individuals with good hiring practice. When America sets up a pipeline with a similar economic structuring, the intent, I think, needs to be to follow through with the creation of jobs and securing the jobs with individuals through good hiring practice, so as to bolster the American economy, to assist with ensuring economic boundaries expand, especially with the awareness that expansion may vary. The American population, like the global population, is going to continue to grow. So I think bringing attention to the core of the situation may prove extremely valuable to addressing what may be of long-term considerations for good economic growth for a country of itself, though a country interdependently. What other factors may align for the individuals already attempting to navigate the landscape of the immigration dynamics, the birthright citizen dynamics, the legal landscape of being in a volatile state, not of one's baseline equilibrium, though of socio-economical, political dimensions that need not be the focus for one's energies, especially when one might have other responsibilities that are benefiting the very country of which one is in. These dynamics do not apply to everyone to the same degree. Another factor is not every individual agrees with the fight against birthright citizenship. Not everyone agrees with the attempts at shifting immigration in a way that may prove harmful to a community, especially considering that there are emotional, psychological, social dimensions at hand for those communities that experience adverse effects of these shifts. So, with good growth comes the necessities of good innovation. All right, it's time for some origami. So I have a squarish sheet of paper here. And I'm going to fold it point to point one time. Then I'm going to fold it in half, point to point. So up and down, then left to right, point to point. One more time though, in general, point to point. Next, I'm going to fold up the bottom portion just a bit. Just a bit. Afterward, I have these corners pointing up. I'm going to fold them toward that middle line of the second point-to-point fold. Hereafter, I'm going to rotate work to fold in the tippy points here. Now I'll show it on the other side here. Just fold in this tippy point here. And fold in the outsides. Now we're just gonna fold in the edge points. So with that, we'll just fold in one more time. This top part here. And voila. Origami bunny face. You can draw on it if you like. Of course, it's decorative. So if you have a plain sheet, the marks you make may be more visible than if you have a decorative sheet, as this is. So, I champion reading physical books. When an individual reads physical books, the brain changes. Long-term health benefits from reading a physical book. The sex talk you never got. Pastor Jolman is really addressing how church cultures may subscribe to a purity culture and is expounding for an appreciation of the sexual realms. Noting that shame is actually a work of evil that is an implementation of an evil strategy that might permeate a church culture. What I find valuable about that concept is that one may be in a church culture that embraces purity culture, that brings about shame, that is using a strategy of evil against its constituents. I don't support harmful prudish culture. I do believe that individuals have choice, and approaching a healthful, safe, hedonistic lifestyle mindfully is not for anyone else to shame, especially when one's life is one's life. So the text navigates dimensions of trauma, of healing, of what shame can do to an individual's psyche, how people can heal, how people can choose to live their life with an awareness of self and really navigate toward embracing the life of which is healthfully mindful and pleasurable personally. So the addressing of such a dynamic might be really interesting for people that are well aware of the Bible. People that are aware of Christianity particularly might find many instances of procreation in the Bible. So how might any church subject procreation, marriage, sex to only so many fine lines? Now, the key is to address being mindful, healthful, safe with one's decision making. So I think there are many ways to address these dynamics that may be of the purview of an individual beyond one's familial culture, church culture, external culture. One must identify with oneself. And how does one really navigate these boundaries in a way that is safe, is mindful? So how does one approach information in a way that will not be harmful? There are many ways to approach details, to find understanding, as well as ways to address how to debrief oneself when one encounters details, to really comprehend what might this mean and how do I feel about this now? How might I feel about this tomorrow? How might I feel about this years from now? So these dynamics are important to address because these dynamics are a part of being mindful with self. As one continues to gain experience living on this planet, one may experience different situations. One's life may change drastically for whatever reason. So, how is one approaching life? This connects to the mindful dynamics of which how one is approaching information and engaging with how this information might mean. Because there is no definitive answer, there's no clear-cut defining for what one might experience for oneself in development. Though one may acknowledge experiencing and reflect on experiencing and engage with what that might mean for one's personal growth. Thank you for joining. I don't know. We can talk about it. Onward and upward, Kevin DeFren.